Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar news update. This one is going to be about the preview pages that we now have for Avatar The Last Airbender Imbalance Part 3. Specifically, we have 10 preview pages thanks to Edelweiss. So here is the listing of Imbalance Part 3 and Edelweiss, and you can see in the images and illustration section we have two kind of double pages, so overall 10 pages in total. You can also see down the bottom, that's where I have my request pending for the review copy of the book. And as you can see there, it has been 30 days. I put my request in the first day it went live, so my request has been pending for 30 days. I don't know if it's been approved, when it will be approved or not approved, but given that they put up preview pages, I assume it will be at some point soon. But yeah, let's get into the preview pages here. So here they are in bigger size. Here's the first ones. Now, I think these have to be probably either the first 2 pages of the book or page 3 and 4. I think there probably is a page before that, just because what Toph says in the opening panel doesn't really feel like a perfect way to start the book. There probably is something that happens immediately before this. But anyway, Toph says she can't lead a bunch of Bender supremacists if she's not a Bender anymore. Katara, arguing with her, of course, says, Aang has only taken away someone's bending once before, and that was the Fire Lord. Li Ling isn't him. She's not threatening the world with destruction. Toph says, no, she's just threatening this city. Did you miss the part where I got buried in rubble because she blew up my dad's factory? Bit of a standoff. Katara obviously is kind of pretty intense, angry about this, and Toph asked the question, also pretty intense, why are you so upset about what I said? And Katara being fairly obvious with this, and especially saying it to Toph, I think the expression gets it across pretty well of like, really Toph? You don't understand why I'd be angry about what you're suggesting? Toph, it's taking away someone's bending. It's removing a part of who they are. It's not a decision to be made lightly. And I think the person she's saying it to should understand this. Like, I get the idea of like, Toph is written as being very snappy and stuff like that in part 1 and 2. I like the way she's being written, but it's purposefully meant to be, I think, Toph before some development on stuff like this, and especially with her bending and how important it is to her in terms of it is her sight. If she ever got her bending taken away, it isn't just the ability to bend rocks that's taken away. It is her ability to see the world that's taken away as well, which proves the point of bending is more than just a tool. For some people, it is a whole extra sense, and for Toph, it makes up for a sense she doesn't have. So, I like that point there in terms of just Katara being pretty clear to the point of like, it's taking away a part of who they are. And of course, for Katara, her bending has an emotional attachment to her because in a way, it's not just her own bending, of like, she was allowed to have this bending, allowed to survive this long because of the sacrifice her mother made to allow her to be the last waterbender from the south. So, there's that emotional connection, but there's also that kind of physically that it's an important thing for Toph. Suki to Aang says, and I actually like that here, that this is something, like it is Suki talking to a character that's not Sokka, so I like that. If you take away your bending, is that something benders would be okay with? You've only done it once before to Fire Lord Ozai. Sokka points out, who everyone agrees was a very bad person. It's fine he lost his bending, but Li Ling's different. Okay, she's a very bad person, but she's a civilian. You might be risking your relationship with the bender community, Aang. Which is a very, very valid point in all of this, of like, it wouldn't set the best example if Aang just goes around taking away the bending of any bender who causes even the most minor bit of trouble. Especially with Li Ling, where her bending itself inherently isn't the thing that has caused all of this. The issue here is pretty much her as a leader, just kind of riling up the benders, more so than her direct abilities of like earthbending everything down. So Aang obviously hasn't spoken about this, and you can see, I think the expression gets across, he's really lost in thought about this. It's not the most comfortable topic of conversation. He knows how serious this ability is. And Toph notes this and says, well, what's your take on this, Twinkle Toes? You've been real quiet. And he just says, I need to think about this. I'm going to talk to Li Ling. She might be willing to tell her followers to stop their attacks. Talk all you want, that lady isn't changing her mind. So, first 2 pages, very good. And immediately we cut over to Li Ling, and I assume this is the immediate follow-up 2 pages. So he sits down in front of her in the cage and she says, "Hello Avatar, what can I do for you?" He responds, "I spend a lot of time in the Earth Kingdom. There are many people here who I care about, both benders and non-benders, so tell me what I can do to resolve this conflict. I don't want to see your followers get hurt, because I will defend the non-benders of Cranefish Town." So just pointing out the idea that if your followers are going to be violent, I will defend the non-benders if you're going to attack them. Be aware of that, if you care about them at all, basically. And she just says, "It's sweet how you think you can change the world through talking, Avatar Aang. Not all avatars believe that, but you're special, devoted to your peaceful airbender ideals. You even refused to take the life of the tyrant Fire Lord, even as he was attempting to burn the Earth Kingdom to the ground." And Aang says, "I did spare his life, and I saved the Earth Kingdom too. I'll find a way to resolve this conflict peacefully as well." And Li Ling, who's usually very, very composed, kind of snaps at this and says, "I know what you did to the Fire Lord when you spared his life, Avatar. You should have killed him. A life without bending isn't worth living." That is a pretty heavy statement. Now, the problem with Li Ling is that we don't really know what informs that. I think a lot of her really depends on what this book actually does with her in regards to explaining what her motivations are, in terms of why is she so heavily supportive of the benders here. Because she doesn't have to be that way, because she is owns a factory and stuff like that, owns a company or whatever. She's doing well. Her daughters are going to do well in all of this. She is in no danger, but she's very supportive of all of the benders in everything that's happened here. So what is the problem? What personal reason, what happened to her at the hands of non-benders because of situations like this is causing her to go so far and be this way? That's what this book needs to deliver on. Because lines like this are good, but it needs to have backing behind it to really mean something when you get down to it. Because she's pointing out here that basically, in a way, she's effectively saying, if you take my bending away, I have nothing to live for. Almost that I'll kill myself if you take my bending away. And that's a very heavy, opinion on it, but that's what she's saying. That's what she's getting across. Aang says, "I won't allow you or your followers to harm any more non-benders in Cranefish Town." And she just says, "Well then, Avatar Aang, the question is how far you are willing to go to protect them." So I suppose she's basically pointing out that I'm not going to call my followers off. They're going to attack non-benders, and she's basically saying, you as the kind of peaceful, non-violent Avatar, how are you going to defend them without fighting back against non-benders? And is almost laying down the gauntlet of, are you going to take their bending away or what? And so on. Very, very interesting for Aang as the Avatar to have to deal with this. The talking hasn't worked here, but there's more to come. So anyway, after this we actually cut to a different scene. And I think it gives us a sense for how the flow of this book is going to work. So what happens here is that a fire is set on the business council. And then in the aftermath of this, as we cut into, I'll just quickly explain the kind of flow of what happens here. We get this scene of Aang talking to Sokka. At the top of this page, it is mentioned that Li Ling they don't have Li Ling anymore. So as a result of this fire, Li Ling is freed. And then in the last couple of pages, we see obviously some of the action stuff that's going on in relation to this. So it gives us a sense that from here, obviously they maybe, they change clothes because obviously they're back in their normal outfits here. And something like the next morning, the impression that I get is that Ru and Yaling are going to execute their plan. And that plan is going to be setting the town on fire to act as a distraction so they can get their mother out. And that means that Aang will have interacted with Li Ling but have not made the decision either way to take her bending away, but before he can make a decision, she's taken away from them. But anyway, let's go through this. So Satoru says, the business council is under attack. Where are the council members? Lau and the other non-benders had a meeting today. They must still be inside the building. Toph says, I'm going to get my dad. You guys put out the fire. And Katara and Aang do so with waterbending. Toph bursts through the door, and it's noted to Lau by one of the other members, "Lau, have I told you how impressive your daughter is?" So it's non-benders noting the importance of bending in certain situations, at least. Aang says, "What was the point of this attack? Benders just set the building on fire, then took off. I'm worried." And obviously the idea is that it was just a distraction, because in this scene, like I said, Aang says, "If I'd done what Toph said and taken away Li Ling's bending when we'd captured her, everything might be over by now." So clearly, they don't have her captured anymore. But Sokka says, "This Bender supremacist movement is more than one person. Remember all the Benders that we saw at the Underground Rally? Some of them were even on the Business Council. Are you willing to take away the bending of all Li Ling's followers too?" No, of course not. All of this, the pollution, the tension between benders and non-benders, it started with the factory machines. It's the same as when the Fire Nation attacked the other nations using tanks and steamships. They never would have gone to war if they didn't have that technology. Top of the next page, it was better when people at least tried to live in harmony with nature. All these machines do is cause pollution and problems. Sokka says, "There's a lot about the good old pre-machine days that doesn't seem good to me," speaking as a non-bender. "You've seen how machines can make things between benders and non-benders a little more equal. Satoru's a non-bender and he could manage an entire factory by himself, something that would have been impossible without the help of benders only a few years ago. The pollution is awful and we need to find a way to deal with that, but you can't blame the rise of bender supremacy in Cranefish Town on machines. You have to blame it on the benders running around burning down buildings and attacking non-benders." Now, it is an interesting one here of giving Sokka this role to sort of act as the kind of counterpoint and present that to Aang. In part 1 and part 2, they only really had a very minor, like, Sokka presenting the non-bender point of view angle to Aang. This is hitting it a little bit more heavy of him kind of really presenting his own opinion on it. Now, I think purposefully, I don't know if it's really meant to be the kind of absolute truth of the situation here, because, he is speaking here as a non-bender, and, we know Sokka's sort of pro-machine anyway, so he's not really going to be the one to be overly anti-machine. That's why, he notes, the pollution's awful, we need to find a way to deal with it, but it's not really like, he's sort of brushing it aside a little bit. And then saying that, like, it's not about the machines, it's about the people who are causing the problems, which is like, yes, but also the machines ultimately did sort of cause all of this in the first place, because again, the machines were what led to the benders basically losing their jobs, and that's ultimately, when you take away Li Ling and the amplification of this into being a bit more violent and setting stuff on fire, the core issue that is causing any fractures in the town is that benders lost their jobs. And it doesn't seem like the business council or anyone is really doing anything to come up with a solution for the fact that benders suddenly went from having jobs to not having jobs, and it just seems like nothing is kind of being done to help the benders kind of fix that. And so that's why, the violence is coming out. So ultimately, that is the solution that you need to solve, because what the solution to the whole, benders running around attacking buildings is just, defeating Li Ling and, her kind of faction of things, because she has just amplified she's made bigger an issue that was already there sort of simmering. But the simmering issue, the smaller form of it, is actually what you need to resolve. The Li Ling thing, for the most part, is kind of like resolved. There'll be, obviously, her story still has to come to an end. We haven't seen it yet, but that's that. Will the book say anything and come up with a solution on what to do here with regards to benders and jobs? Now, one obvious way is that, like, okay, pollution, deal with that. Can the benders do something with that? Is that a job for them to create the waste system of the town? Because the factory it is definitely a problem that it seems like they have no waste disposal kind of thing at all. That's why the town is in kind of rough shape. That's why they had to clean the beach in the first part and so on. So it's an interesting one here in that, like, okay, it's a little bit of a wise kind of statement from Sokka, but it's also not the most ideal thing. So I wonder, will there be a little bit more on this between Aang and Sokka? Because like, I get what they're doing with Aang here, of just like, as much as he's used to the era that he's in right now, he is ultimately more used to the way things were 100 years ago when technology wasn't as prevalent in the world. And he is here experiencing very, very quickly the super fast advancements of technology and what it's causing. And especially like with him as an airbender and what he's just experienced and stuff like the rift and what Cranefish Town is built on. It is this sort of antithesis of like everything that like he knows basically what this place used to be. So it's kind of this like issue that you understand from Aang's perspective, and I think what they're trying to kind of get across here is like Aang and Sokka maybe individually don't have the exact perfect take on the situation, but maybe somewhere in the middle is the actual take. So we'll see if the book has any attempt to come up with a solution by the end, but we'll have to wait and see. Last 2 pages. These are kind of the ones where it's kind of maybe harder to predict. So like, okay, Li Ling's taken away. How do we get to this situation here? We're kind of action scene, a lot of benders. You can see here there's Li Ling. This is either Li Ling. Is that Li Ling? I think it's Li Ling. It's not Ru. It doesn't look like her. So it makes sense that it's all benders here. So what's happened with Ru and all of this? But anyway, they're chasing after Aang. What's going on here? Is this towards the end of the book or more towards the middle? Either way, you see Aang kind of leads them on his glider into this kind of metal maze, which obviously I assume Toph has probably made out in front of one of the factories, and it's part of the plan. He says, "Here we go." So they watch everyone rush in. They note that there probably is some sort of a traps in the maze, and they all run in. It's a dead end. They try to turn around. And I assume probably what's going to happen here is like Toph arrives, shuts the door, and that takes a large amount of the benders kind of temporarily out of the action and allows maybe the focus to shift onto the main players of the fight. But I think you get a sense for, okay, this is kind of how the book is going to flow. But with this book, I think it is all about how they resolve everything. It's the character stuff that they need to do with Ru, Li Ling, and Li Ling, and explain the motivations. Ru, I think, has to have a pretty big scene where she probably stands up to her mother or her sister, and they do something there. I think Li Ling, they'll probably have some sort of a solution by the end for her finding a path to go on. I'm thinking Metalbender Police Officer could be an option if they reveal she can metalbend, placing her and Toph, kind of together in a way. I can see sort of being a thing going forward. Li Ling, again, it's the sort of Avatar thing with villains of like, do you just lock her up, lock her away, or do you attempt to give her any sort of a, nice resolution? And like, ultimately, I think that comes down to just what informs her, passion for this topic. The father of the girls, was it something with him? That's something that happened with him or something that happened to him that causes her to be the way she is. And depending on how emotional that is, if they do it, that could inform that. But yeah, in terms of the actual bender non-bender issue, like I said, it's, do you give the benders jobs? Like that's the thing you need to solve, and I don't know if it's going to be able to do that, because Sokka's solution seems to be just put all these people in jail, even though they're sort of just frustrated because the way things have gone in Cranefish Town, they haven't really been given a chance. And yeah, they've done something wrong by going down the violent path, but you can sort of see that, with the likes of Lau sort of in charge, have the benders been really treated fairly in all of this? I like the nuance on kind of both sides, but where are we really going with this? And will there be any setup for the next book? And there's loads of questions that you have with this. I think it's going to be a tough task for this book to just bring everything to an end perfectly, in a way where this book is really, really going to feel worthwhile. I'm still sort of worried it will go the way of North and South, and it's just this okay ending, but did we really need to tell this story? They definitely need to get back to telling a big, important story, and especially these preview pages coming out the same week as The Rise of Kyoshi is out, a book that just feels super important, tons of detail, and so well done. It kind of makes the comics feel very low-key, especially when they're not dealing with the most important topics and character arcs. And so that's something as well, to add another kind of thing that the comics sort of have to overcome. But yeah, I hope we keep faith there in Hicks on as the writer. It looks at this point maybe Peter Wortman won't be continuing on, but we don't know. We'll see what they do. I'd be okay if he continued on. If we have to get a new artist, that's fine too, but I hope they have a plan, because I want to know what's next for Avatar. And hopefully, with Comic-Con coming up, hopefully there is some sort of announcement. Usually it doesn't happen going into SDCC, it's usually going into New York Comic-Con, but I think the timing of the books works out where maybe it could happen here. We still have to wait and see. So, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on these preview pages. What are your thoughts on how Imbalance Part 3 is going to go? What do you think is going to happen? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.